منبر صوت الشعب، الراي والراي الآخر، شعب واحد ووطن واحد.
مرحبا بكم جميعا مشاهدين لمنبر صوت الشعب وكذلك المستمعين لصوت الشعب أينما كنتم. مرحبا بكم في حلقة بتاعتنا اليوم. وخلوني أنا نعتذر لأنه اوريدي يعني نينا قاعدين نعلم إنه صوت الشعب ما قاعدين نشتغل حلقات يوم السبت، لكن طبعا لحاجة اضطراري جدا ومهم زي ما أنا ذكرت امبارح إنه لازم نعمل فيها انترفيو الليلة مع بروفيسور تاج الخزين، وكلنا نحن ملمين بتطورات الماشية في جنوب السودان والمتعلقة بقناة حفر قناة جنجولي وتنظيف المجاري المائية في بحر غزال. ولذلك صوت الشعب قدرنا نتصل ببروفيسور تاج الخزين برضو عشان نستضيفه ويجي يجاوب علينا بعض الأسئلة ونشوف النظر بتاعه. أنا بعتذر لأور دايفرسيتي إنه جينا اشتغلنا في يوم الليل. أنا عارف إنهم عندهم غرفة لكن ما في طريقة we have to come and do a show. الناس اللي ما متابعين هسه they can come and later on listen to the show. The interview actually will be in English with Professor Taj, and he with me in the studio. And in some point also will ask actually some question in Arabic. نحن معنا قاعدين كتير. We have a specific question we want to ask them the Professor Taj, and also if still we will take some question from the audience. Those are watching from Facebook and YouTube, and also those listening in Clubhouse. But let me bring Professor Taj. He's with me here in the studio. زي ما انا قلت الانترفيو بكون بانجليزي، لكن برضه هنا نسال بعض الاسئله بعربي، لانه هو طبعا بروفيسور بيتكلم عربي بكل طلاقه، عشان نحاول برضه الناس نفهم الناس بالضبط الماشي قاعد يحصل شنو. So Professor Taj, welcome to Voice of the People again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah,
I'm hearing you very well.
Thank you so much. I'm hearing you very well. Your voice is always loud and clear. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Very good. Thank you for joining us today. And actually, like we have questions for you, and some questions also. They need to be answered. The main question, and I will want you to make a comment about it. It is the dredging by the foreign nation as a solution for the floods, and does Jonglei Canal benefit people of South Sudan? Before I give you floor actually to give some remarks on that question or on the topic itself, I need to make a few remarks to the audience. Actually, we know the floods have affected 80,035 people in South Sudan last year and the year before. Those from 80,035, 200,000 of those affected are in the camps in the country. And at one point, Bantiu, a city of approximately 300,000 people, was under 2 meters of water. Both Bantiu and Jonglei stayed where or his heart did like the other places. And also recently, we have some information, the massive equipment totaling 225 tons unloaded on 21 trucks and 12 meters trailers have arrived in Bantiu this week. This equipment arrived from Egypt in Bantiu, Unity State, for the dredging Baragazal basin into Lake No. And then after that, the water will flow into the main Nile. The main question or the main concern of the South Sudanese people and also the scientists in the country, no studies were made as prerequisite for the water, for any contracting, dredging, or importation of equipment. The delicate ecosystem of the Sud is in danger, as the way we are seeing now in the country. The haphazard dredging is done. Jonglei Canal is also surface in the proposed formula. Interlinkage between floods, canals, dredging is not clear to the general public in South Sudan. So what is your comment here, Professor, before we go forward?
Right. One early comment is that the figure actually of the people who were affected is 835,000. That's very close to 1 million people. That's roughly about 6 or 7% of the total population of South Sudan, which is about 11 million. For those from our listeners or the host, if you want more information, you can log into the website of the Embassy of the Netherlands, the Embassy of Holland in Juba. They have done very good work. They have got a very professional article in their website about the floods. Right. And let me go to your main question. As a general rule, there is no connection between floods and canals. Absolutely no connection. And before I go further, Jonglei Canal was envisaged as a colonial project in 1904. Then it was detailed in 1907. Then it was taken over by the Egyptians in 1947, 46. And then, as you know, in the 70s, the design and the dredging started until John Garang and the SPLM, SPLA stopped it toward the end of 1983, early 94. So whatever was designed for Jonglei Canal was designed for draining water, so 4.5 billion cubic meters to 4.8 billion cubic meters of water to be drained from the sud, from the swamps into the main Nile. There is no doubt about that. If you Google this, it will come out. It is all over the place. We don't need to go further into that. So the project was not designed or studied or implemented 250, 260 of the 360 kilometers have been dug, sometimes to a depth of 10 meters. So from inception, from feasibility, from design, from execution, there was no mention at all of floods or controlling floods. So let us park that now for a while. Let us come to the floods. Are these floods and the harm that they have caused our people, is it because the riverbeds are small? The riverbeds that have been flowing for millions of years since water came to earth. So all of a sudden, these waterways have become inadequate to carry the water? Or is it a climate change phenomena, as happening in Mexico, as happening in Brazil, as happening in Australia, as happening in Canada, as happening in the United States, and I can continue counting? So when you have got floods, you don't dig canals. When you have got floods, you do not drain your rivers. You address the calamity of the people and help them, and then see how you can mitigate floods through adaptability with the climate. You cannot conquer the climate, but you can adapt to it. You can take measures so that you mitigate the effects. Let me stop there and we continue with more questions if you have them.
Thank you, Prof. Actually, I forgot to just introduce you, just give a light background about you to the audience. Actually, our guest speaker, Professor Tag Elkazin, is an international expert on Nile waters for over 50 years. And actually, the last time, we actually introduced him to the audience and listeners of Voice of People Forum. Thank you, Prof. The next question, can you explain to us, or can you explain to the audience, to the people of South Sudan, to the government of South Sudan, what is the difference between clearing is and cleaning, dredging, and draining? Can you explain to us, Prof?
This is a good question. It's an important question for common knowledge. When you are cleaning debris or cleaning silting, then you are doing a localized remedy for a blockage that happened with time. It is not an indigene, it is not part of the river. Something happened that blocked a certain part. It could be 1 meter wide, it could be 500 meters wide. So you clear that, you clear the debris, you clear the accumulation of the water hyacinths, you clear the accumulation of the roots of trees. That kind of thing is clearing. So clearing and cleaning are one and the same thing. You clear to clean the run, but you don't dig it. Now, dredging is a different story. Dredging is when you go deeper, when you want to widen or increase the depths of the natural river bed. That's dangerous. I will come to that later on, and I will explain to you how you go about that. But for the moment, there is a massive difference. There is no connection between clearing, which is cleaning and clearing, and between dredging and draining. Once you dredge, you drain the water from the sides, you drain the water on the banks, you drain the water from the lowlands into the river, and on it goes. This is the situation with Bahr al-Ghazal. And let us share a very interesting piece of information about Bahr al-Ghazal Basin. It is the only basin in South Sudan where the water, the tributaries, and the total discharge in Lake No is 100% within South Sudan. So it is the only water that we own from source to Lake No. This is not the case with the Sobat because the major contributor to the Sobat is the Bibor River. This is not the case with the White Nile because the major source of the White Nile is from Lake Victoria, which is shared with a number of countries. So it is our own. Nobody can stand and say, why are you doing that? The water is originating from us and is being kept by us either in the Sud or in Lake No. And the discharge of Bahr al-Ghazal Basin is 15 billion cubic meters of water per year.
Okay, Prof, before we go forward, really it will be good if you try to answer that question also in Arabic. So to explain it to the public people in South Sudan so they can catch it up. Because أنا دايرين يعني نجاوب على السؤال ده بالعربي عشان نقدر في تنظيم شو. تفضل بروف.
جدا جدا. السؤال في الحقيقة هو ما هو الفرق بين النظافة والتنظيف والفرق ما بين التغويص وانسياب المياه الراكدة. ده الوضع. لو انت عندك مجرى بتاع نهر سيو، بسري، جور، نعام، بحر العرب، whatever it is، ريفر كير، لو في واحد في ديل انت لاحظت الاهالي لاحظوا انه والله في كميه من اعشاب النيل اتكومت، والله في كميه من الجذور بتاعت الاشجار والجذع الكبير اتكومت، قفل المويه. انت بتقوم تعمل كليرنج، يو كلير الحاجه الزايده في المويه، الحاجه جديده. ده هو كليرنج. الكليرنج بيعمل شنو؟ بينظف لك المجرى، بدل ما يكون فيه عوائق، يكون فيه حاجات تعطل المويه، تعطل لو في مركب، انت بتشيلوا حاجات الزايده دي. لكن ده ست ما بتمشي في حته ثانيه، ما بتهبش الحته الاوريجينال بتاع النهر ذاته. طيب ده كليرنج اند كليننج. نجي لدريدجنج اند دريننج. دريدجنج لما انت تجيب كراكات زي الكراكات اللي حسه وصل في بانتيو ده، 2 منه، 2 كراكه كل واحده 50 طن، حكايه كبيره جدا. تقوم تجيبه وتاخده في صندل، تاخده في بارج او زي ما يسموه صندل، وبعدين يقوم يحفر في النهر، ويخد في الصندل ده في صندل ثاني عشان يودي اللي بيحفروا ده يطلعوا برا. فده بيعمل شنو؟ انت لما تعمل الدريدجنج ده اللي هو تشيل تغوص في المجرى بتاع النهر، ده بيعمل دريننج. لو في مويه في الجنبات بيجي نازل جوا المجرى. لو في مويه في ميعه بيسموه ميعه بيجي نازل. لو مويه كان بيمشي في حته ثاني، انت لما تغوص هنا مويه بيجي في الحته دي. ده بيطلع المويه مع المجرى بتاع النهر. طيب المجاري بتاعت النهر دي بتجي وين؟ بتجي في حته اسمه ليك نو. طبعا ده اسم غريب، كلمه نو دي لا دينكا لا نوير لا نانجاتوم، ده كلمه انجليزيه. ليك نو، ونو معناتها لا ما في. الانجليز لما شافوا في الاول افتكروا ليك. لما عملوا الدراسه بتاعه لقى انه ده actually is not a lake، عشان كده سموه ليك نو. It started by saying there is no lake and then it was moved into lake no for simplicity. السبب انه ما في ليك. ده نقطه بتاع التجمع بتاع المويه، ومن النقطه بتاع التجمع ده هو بيمشي في النيل الابيض، بيمشي على السودان، بيمشي على مصر. فاي نقطه بتاع مويه من بحر الغزال بيسن انت تجيبه لك نو انت فقدته. ده بيمشي في المين نايل وبيمشي على مصر طوالي. دي الخطوره. I hope ده جاوب السؤال بتاعك.
يا ثانك يو، انت جاوبت السؤال بروف. والناس انا شايف داير انوه للاودينس، الناس اللي عندهم question please try to keep your question from now عشان الاسئله بتاعكم ما يمشوا قدام هناك. لينا في اسئله رئيسيه داير البروف يجاوب عليه، بعد ذاك بنديكم some minutes للكويشن. يعني انا بسال الناس اللي دايرين لهم question so they can write down the question and also Prof will answer those questions. Thank you again, Prof. Professor, can you actually describe to us what constitutes a credible visibility that can inform both the GOS, which is the government of South Sudan, and give us a sense of a direction as government and the people of South Sudan?
Right. طيب انت ما بتمشي في you don't go for a project unless you study the project, what we call a feasibility study. في الحالة دي in this case, because water is not a joke, water is part of the national security of any country, you need to go for what we call a comprehensive feasibility study. Comprehensive feasibility study ده انت you need to study the economic viability of the project. Is it economically feasible? Do you have the money for it? Does it have a return? That's one area that you need to study. The second area is peace and conflict impact assessment. If you go for the project, how will it impact on conflict and peace? Will it generate more conflict among the people? And as we all know, we have got enough conflicts at so many levels. We do not want to add to them. The third one is livelihood impact assessment. If you dredge, if you drain, you are going to disturb the natural habitat of the fish. And as you know, a lot of our people are dependent on fish. Another one is the impact on wildlife and domestic life. What will happen to all those game reserves within the Sud? Where will the animals go? Will they be affected? Will their drinking areas be affected? And then we come to the pastoralists, our people who come to the Toich every year. Abgar are used to drink it from the river directly. When you deepen the river, you are making the bank high, the bank of the river, because the water will go down. What will happen to the cattle? They will fall into the water and die. So that is part of the livelihood. What about the women and children lens? Any feasibility study must cater for women and children lens. How will the children be impacted? And as you know, most of the water is actually brought by our children. Another area is environmental impact assessment. The Sud is registered as a Ramsar World Heritage. Ramsar is a town in Iran, and this is under the umbrella of the UN. So when a wetland is designated as Ramsar Reserve, Ramsar Protected, this is international law. You cannot just ignore it. South Sudan is no longer under the umbrella of Khartoum. South Sudan is an independent country now, and they have got to respect international law if they want to be part of the international community. So you have got to address the issue of international law. Is what I am doing going to tamper with international law? And in the case of the Sud, it doesn't make any difference if South Sudan has signed on UNESCO or signed on Ramsar or signed on any law. Because once a law has entered into force, that's it. Everybody must respect it. South Sudan can turn around and say, I'm not going to respect it. And then they will have to pay the price. One other area is the immediate term and long term. Are there any unforeseen consequences in the immediate term? And are there any unforeseen consequences in the long term? This kind of consultancy, if we want to take the case just of Bahr al-Ghazal Basin, let alone Jonglei Canal, will come to it. You are talking about probably a year to 18 months of study. You are talking about 8, 9, or 10 experts in different fields with a team leader, with a strong team leader to conduct such a feasibility study. And we're talking probably about $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, the cost of the consultancy alone. Then the government of South Sudan will have can make an informed decision based on the feasibility study. It has got to be neutral. It has got to be impartial. It has got to be evidence-based. It has got to be adequate for the purpose, and it has got to be transparent. And the people have got to have a say and a voice. And at the end of the day, once the feasibility study is completed, another team, a checking team, will do what we call uh, uh, evaluation, monitoring and evaluation. Did the consultant do a good job? Did the money go into its right places, or the consultant was bribed and he put out the report in favor of one politician or the other? So there is a whole intricate process that takes time, it takes money, and it takes knowledge before you can come to an informed decision. A politician could sit and say, this is what we want to do. In a democracy, he will be thrown out. If there is no democracy, whatever he wants will be done. And I will assume that we have got a democratic process in South Sudan, and I will assume that our leaders really have the best interest of the people at their heart. And the best interest of the people should be the guiding principle. So if I hire a consultant to do this, the first word I will tell him, the first sentence, that he has got to have the best interest of the people at heart. Nothing else. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Actually, as you know, the concern of the government of South Sudan for the last 2 or 3 years was dealing with the flood or the flooding in South Sudan. And we can say that is river overflow or flash floodings, something like that, which actually affected 835,000 people in South Sudan. So for you as a specialist, what is your definition of a scientific process that deal with the issue of the flooding in South Sudan? Because now it's a concern for the government, and also it's looked like the government of South Sudan, they don't have more option to solve the issue of the flooding in the country. And that while now they run out to Egypt, to Egyptian government, bringing them to the country to try to create the area, and also to dig the canal. So can you give us the scientific process, Professor Tag?
Yes, first let me say what we should not do, and then we will go into what we should do. Let me take the case of Brazil. Two dams, because of the floods, two dams broke. Two dams broke in Brazil. Here in Canada, in the West, we have got massive flooding. Hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated. Australia, all you need to do is log Australian floods, and the screen will be full. India, parts of Europe, I mean, all those places, none of them went for dredging the river. South Africa, which is close to us, South Africa has been in the news for about 4 weeks now. About 500 people died of the flooding. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. Property was destroyed. South Africa did not dig 1 meter in a canal, and South Africa did not dredge 1 meter in a river. The reason is this is climate change, and climate change cannot be fought. You need to accommodate climate change. You need to adapt with climate change. If you cannot beat them, join them. You cannot beat climate change. You have got to join the climate change and make sure that it does not hurt you. So that's what we should not do. What we should do is we should study the flood areas. Why was there flooding from certain parts? Is it the water that rose in Lake Victoria, which happened? Lake Victoria rose not only now, in 1964 and 1946. Everybody knows that is in the records. When Lake Victoria rises, there is nothing that you can do. Only God can stop it. Because the water will come to Kagera Dam and the Ugandans will open the gates, otherwise the dam will collapse and the water will come gushing in the White Nile. So if the water came from a foreign source, what can you do about it? And we're talking about massive water. We're talking a rise of 3, 4, 5 meters in the level of Lake Victoria, the largest freshwater lake in Africa and the second largest in all of the world. So you cannot beat climate change. So we have got to research, do a mini research of why did we have these floods in 3 consecutive years. Also, we need to study if this continues. Those of us who are from Jonglei State, in 2015, there was a drought. The crops collapsed. People were complaining. Just only 7 years back, there was a drought, not flooding. So is this a cycle from outside, or does it have roots on the ground? So we need to research why do we have floodings in these areas. And then the next step that we do is to mitigate the suffering of the people who were affected. Help them as much as we can. And then we need to look at close to the banks of the rivers. Did the people build the structures that obstructed the water, the additional water? Because most of the time the flooding is not coming from the river. The flooding is coming from the areas around the river because the water cannot get into the river. Those are two different sets of affairs. And this has been the case. Those of you who are interested, go into the website of the Embassy of the Netherlands in Juba. They made a very interesting study and they wrote a very interesting report. And Holland is the world leader in flood control, because if they don't do flood control, they will be inundated because a lot of their land is actually under the sea level. So we have got the best people. Euroconsult is now in Uganda. I think they left South Sudan, but they are an international company. They know very well, and if they are employed, then they can actually bring Netherlands experience and expertise into the situation. And the last thing is, let me give you an example. If you, Edward, decide that you want to build a house, let us suppose you don't have a house and you want to build a house. So the first step you will do, you will get your wife, you will get your children, and probably some family members, and talk about it. This is what we call the idea, the project idea. And then you will call an architect. An architect comes and he does the drawings, where the sitting room will be, where the bedrooms will be, where the saloon will be, and he will give you architectural drawings. Then you will call a structural engineer who will tell you how many steel bars must be in the column, how many columns you need to have, what is the mix between cement, sand, and gravel, uh, the beams, how thick should the beams be. He will give you the structure so that the house does not fall down. With those two drawings and those two calculations, you will call a contractor. You will ask for a bid for the contractor. The contractor will come and tell you, well, we are going to charge you $300,000 for that, and we are going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And for that, we are going to bring the following equipment. They would list for you the equipment that's going to implement the design. The contractor is not going to bring the equipment when you say you want to build a house. The contractor will build the equipment to implement and execute the design that was done scientifically. That's the nearest example I can give. So you do not tamper with what is happening until you know exactly what you need, until you design how you deal with it, and only then you list down the equipment and the facilities that will enable you to implement that design. I hope this answered the question.
Yeah, you answered the question, Prof. Just as I want just to give a follow up to this question, and I want you also to answer that question.
Sure.
2 weeks ago, the president advisor, Honorable Paul Manyang, actually he was interviewed by one of the journalists inside the country, and he was being asked about giving a solution of what's going on in the area in the Jonglei, the issue of the flooding. So he was saying the solution to that is to relocate the people, those are in Jonglei area, to relocate them. Some of them should be relocated to Eastern Equatoria, and some of them also they can be relocated to the Loudware, or if Loudware is congested, they should be relocated to the Western Barakazal, into the Raja area. So as also engineer and actually you work in that area, and actually you was also advisor to the Kwal Manyang when he was the governor of Jonglei. Do you think is that a solution, Professor Taj, or all that is creating more conflicts among the communities, and also the government is failing to give scientific solution to what's supposed to be done? So can you make a comment on that, Prof?
Sure. General Kolmanyang is actually an engineer. He's not just a fighter. He's not a veteran. He's not a hero of the people of South Sudan. He's also an engineer. I work very closely with him, and I have a lot of respect for him. He's an honest man. And what he said is one of the solutions in principle. When you have got flooding, repeated flooding in an area, as you cannot remove the land, and as you cannot remove the river, the only variable is the people. So you need to remove the people, in principle, to higher lands. Where those higher lands will be, this is where your question comes. You don't just sit back and decide that I am going to take 3,000 people from the land Unwera and put them in Western Equatoria. Look at the trouble that happened when the Dinka Boer moved their cattle and they went to Western Equatoria, and they stayed there for a number of years, and finally they had to be taken back. The frame of reference in South Sudan, as we speak, is regrettably the tribe. If I meet Edward somewhere, oh, are you from South Sudan? Yes. My first question will be from which area and what tribe. So our identity is still not based on the country. Our identity is still identified with the tribe. And all the tribes have got lands. Yesterday and today, there is unfortunate fighting in the border between Uganda and South Sudan. And the Uganda Defense Forces are encroaching into the lands of South Sudan. All Ashuli, but the Ashuli of Uganda are different from the Ashuli of
South
South
Sudan.
Sudan. The Mahdi of Uganda are different from Mahdi of South Sudan. You go to Kajukaji, there are the same tribe is on both sides. You go to the Zandi, the same tribe is with the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. So even within the one tribe, there is a definition by the colonial borders that were created during the era of colonization. So I fully support the suggestion of General Coleman Young in the principle, but in the details, it has got to be studied. And so that you don't create another problem that could be deadly, you need to make sure that the migrating group is happy with the movement, and the host group, the host tribe, are also happy to receive the people. Otherwise, and look at the figure that I will give you. South Sudan is only 11 million people. Some estimates put it at 12 million, some estimates put it at 11, but let us say between 11 and 12 million people. The land mass of South Sudan is over 600,000 square kilometers. So the density of population per square kilometer is extremely low in South Sudan. We are short of people, but we are not short of land. And there are vast areas of Jonglei Plains where the nomads move north and south, and sometimes east and west. It is no man's land. There is nobody there. I have lived in those areas since 1972. I visited them maybe 50 or 60 times. I implemented 10.5 years in that area. Coleman Young asked me to do a survey of what the people want. I went to every corner of that area. There's nobody. The people are concentrated in towns, they are concentrated near running rivers, and they are concentrated around the old establishments that were built by the Brits. But there are vast areas of lands where nobody is living, and they are safe lands. If you go to Buma, the Morley are a small tribe, and they are not increasing for reasons that we all know. So, and there is plenty of space over there, there is plenty of land, there is plenty of minerals. If you go to East Equatoria, it is the same. Sometimes I drive from Kapoita to Narus, and I would not see on the road probably more than 100, 150 people moving in and out. So to buttress and to support the sensible suggestion of General Manyang, yes, that's a viable solution. It is a solution that all the countries in the world resort to as first step. However, it should not be done with a single decision. It should not be done without a study. It should not be done to create another problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me also ask you the question. This question actually I asked you before in the first interview here, but actually I'm going to continue actually asking that question for more understanding to our people in South Sudan and also at the government. Is there a link between floods and Jonglei Canal? And what are the basis of the Jonglei Canal concept? Because if the government themselves, they understood the Jonglei Canal concept, and even the people that will make it easier for us to deal with the situation. So can you answer the question, Prof?
Sure. The floods or the problem with the floods or attending and knowing the problem of the floods is new. I mean, nobody talked about it really before, and looking for solutions and trying to brainstorm solutions. As I said earlier, Jonglei Canal, the concept was thought about by a British engineer who was working for Egypt when Egypt was a British colony. Egypt was colonized by Great Britain until 1936. So he visited the area and he said, "Oh, I mean, there is a lot of water here. Let us see if we can drain it so that it goes to Egypt." So the basic principle, the basic, as the French say, the basic raison d'être, the basic why of the Jonglei Canal is to take water from the said areas into the Nile so that Egypt can have more water to the tune of 4.5 billion cubic meters to 4.8 billion cubic meters with Jonglei 1, because there is more than one Jonglei Canal. At the end of the day, if all the Jonglei Canals are implemented, up to 10 billion cubic meters of water can be drained from South Sudan. The entire volume of water in the Sud is 30 billion cubic meters of water. If you drain one third of that, 10 billion, the Sud is gone. The Sud is gone. Probably 80%, 90% of the Sud will be gone. The wildlife, the domestic life, the touch, the ecology, because there is what we call ecosystem balance. The ecosystem balances itself. If you disrupt one part, then the other will not work. If you have a spear, if you have only the spearhead and you don't have the stick, the spear will not go. So the basic idea of the Jonglei Canal had absolutely nothing to do with the floods, had absolutely nothing to do with the people of South Sudan, had absolutely nothing to do with the interest and the welfare of the people of South Sudan. It was for one reason and one reason only, and that's to drain more water into the Nile so that it goes into Sudan and Egypt. Now, let me take a detour, a little detour, just to explain more to our people. Why now? Why is Egypt panicking now and wanting to push for Jonglei Canal to be completed? The reason is the following. The reason is 1959 agreement. 1959 agreement gave Egypt 55.5 billion cubic meters of water every year, measured at one dam. And it gave Sudan, the old Sudan, the United Sudan, 18.5 billion cubic meters of water. Sudan never used more than 12 billion cubic meters of water. Never, since 1964. Since the operation of the high dam, they never used more than 12 billion cubic meters. So 6 to 7 billion cubic meters of water were going free of charge to Egypt every year since 1964. So why now? Why is this all of a sudden an issue? The issue and the reason is the Grand Renaissance Dam of Ethiopia, with a lake behind the dam that can hold 74 billion cubic meters of water. Now, what Sudan can do, they can ask Ethiopia to hold back the water that they are not going to use, which will be the 6 billion cubic meters of water that have been going to Egypt every year. That will make Egypt short of water. That's what we call the elephant in the room. That's the reason. That's the real reason behind all that. Egypt is short. I sympathize with them. I sympathize. There are 105 million people. They try to do desalination projects, but I think they have about 80 of them now, or 28 of them now. But it is a trickle in the ocean. 93% of the usage of water in Egypt is dependent on the Nile. So I fully understand that it is their livelihood. Herodotus said, if it is not for the Nile, there will be no Egypt. And he's quite right. But there have got to be solutions that are fair to everyone and not fair to one party and unfair to the other party. So that is the history and that is the concept and that's the reason why the whole issue of Jonglei Canal came about. Now, what stopped the canal toward the end of 1984, early 384? It was John Garang. John Garang did his PhD on Jonglei Canal. When the canal stopped, the late Gama Hassan was the commissioner of the corporation of Jonglei Canal. Look at the irony. They take a Madima and they take a South Sudanese and they put him as a commissioner of a project that was going to drain water from South Sudan. It is saddening. So what happened? The SPLA disabled the Rupel. The Rupel is this huge machine that you see in the pictures. And they abducted, if I remember right, about 5 or 6 people from the company called CCI, Compagnie Construction Internationale. It is a French and Italian joint venture. At that time, the representative of the SPLA in France was Dr. Justin Yage, the late Dr. Justin Yage. I worked with Justin to see how we can free the abducted personnel. And the SPLA said, we want all the Caterpillar equipment. And the French agreed. So the SPLA took all the D7s, the D8s, the D9, the graders, and they released the people that they abducted. The SPLA are not killers, they are freedom fighters. And they fought for the freedom of South Sudan. So someone who knew very well what Jonglei Canal was about, and someone who was fighting a liberation war, and he sees that this is part of the problem and he disables it. We have got to stop there. Was he stupid? Was he just a bandit? Certainly not. Thank you. So, to sum up, there is no connection. There is no benefit whatsoever. On the contrary, there could be a lot of damage on South Sudan if the project of Jonglei Canal is reopened. If I were to take a decision, if I were His Excellency the President, I will bring a team of equipment and I will wipe out Jonglei Canal from the surface of the earth. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, before we go to the next question, and we remain with 3 questions from our main question, then we will take like 5-minute question from your time. But let me, I want you to actually try to elaborate in Arabic. يعني تحاول شوية لمعظم الناس في جنوب السودان لأنه الحتة دي مهمة جدا. الربط المنطقي ما بين الحفر بتاع قناة جنجولي كمشروع مصري، مشروع مبتدر بشكل خارجي ما عنده علاقة كومبليتلي بشكل كامل بالشعب بتاع جنوب السودان، والفيضانات القاها تواجه المناطق في جنوب السودان كحاجة مثلا يعني موسمي، يعني فيضانات ما بتيجي طوالي، يعني ممكن كان take 5 years 10 years وفق لدورة مناخية. مثلا دايرينك تشرح بروف ليه حكومة جنوب السودان يعني مثلا واحدة من الحاجات اليومين دول الحكومة قاعد يقولوا إنه مثلا يا أخي إذا أنتم نازل ما دايرين مثلا عشان يعملوا يعني يحصل عملية بتاعت إعادة توطين الناس قاعدين في جنجولي، وأنت بتعرف المشاكل الموجود بين المجتمعات وأنت كنت قاعد في المنطقة ده، يعني قال أنا بنحفر الجنجولي، أنا أحفر الجنجولي. الجنجولي ده ما مشروع بتاعك، ده مشروع مصري. الهدف بتاعه شنو أصلا؟ لأنه زي ما أنت ذكرت قبل شوية بالإنجليزي، السبب واحدة من الأسباب اللي خلت الحركة الشعبية هي تتمر كانت القضية بتاعت قناة جنجولي. الليلة أنت جاي تعفر بأرسوف، أنا دايرين نكتشر شوية كده بعرف بعدها we continue our question.
Right. طيب زي ما قلنا بالإنجليزي، جونجولي كانال مشروع استعماري، مشروع في زمن الاستعمار عندما مصر كانت تحكم السودان مع بريطانيا، ما يسمى بالكوندومينيوم. اللي هو دولتين بيحكموا بلد تاني. فالسودان كله جنوب وشمال كان مستعمر بواسطة مصر وبواسطة إنجلترا. زمان لو زول مشي شوية فوق من الملكال كان في بلد صغير اسمه توفيقية، وفي غابة اسمها غابة التوفيقية. توفيقية ده جاي من توفيق. توفيق ده هو جنة بتاع إبراهيم، وإبراهيم ده جنة بتاع محمد علي باشا. محمد علي باشا الكبير الجغز السودان in 1821 عشان يشيل العبيد ويشيل الذهب. يا جماعة يا جماعة we have got to read the history. We have got to read the history. ده نفس البلد اللي خواجة فكر لما كان هو المدير بتاع المويه في مصر، ومصر مستعمرة. هي مستعمرة بهناك، لكن بجاي بعد مقتل الغردون بقت عندها حكم مع انجلترا. فالمشروع لما بدأ في 1904 ويتصلح شوية 1907، والمصريين بدوا يتكلموا عليه في 1946 بزمن الفيضانات بتاع 1946 ده كان في الشمال فيضانات بطال. كوبري بتاع ام درمان ده كوبري رابط بين خرطوم وام درمان ده مويه بقى ماشي بفوق. المويه موجوده. المصريين لما المشروع بتاع السد العالي ده قام كانوا 30 مليون. النهارده هم 105 مليون عايزين مويه ديفنتلي. وانت لو داير مويه بتعمل اي حاجه، بتقتل عشان تجيب المويه. المشروع بدأ كمشروع استعماري، وانا كلمه استعماري ما بستعملها عشان اسيء لزول. انا بتكلم عن الحقيقه ان السودان شماله وجنوبه منطقه جنقلي كانال كانت المشروع اللي قام فيها عندما كانت مصر احدى الحاكمين بتاعين السودان. مصر وبريطانيا كان بيحكموا السودان 100%. ما كان في حكومه، ما كان في دوله، ما كان في جمهوريه. كان اسمه السودان المصري الانجليزي. اوفيشالي كان اسمه السودان المصري الانجليزي. ففي الزمن ذاك زي ما مصر كانت دايره عبيد تجندهم ودايره ذهب، الناس فكرت في انه والله كمان نشيل المويه بتاع الناس دي، هم ما جايبين خبر. ده الخلفيه. الخلفيه في الحقيقه خلفيه بغيضه جدا، وخلفيه لا تشرف اي زول. خليك من جنوبي، لا تشرف اي زول انه في فرن يعني قوه خارجيه جايه تجي تشيل الموارد بتاعتك كده عينك يا عينك. فبيكون فيها في الحقيقه استهانه وفيها احتقار للناس بتاع جنوب السودان اذا المشروع ده مشي لقدام. طيب اذا كان انت خلينا نرجع لمثل بتاع البيت قبل. نقول والله ادوارد ما عنده بيت وداير يبني بيت، ومشينا نحن في السيناريو بتاع بناء البيت ده. قلنا انت بتجيب المهندس المعماري، وبعدين بتجيب المهندس بتاع الانشاء، وبتعمل الخرط، وتجيب المقاول، حتى بعدين المقاول بيجيب الاكويبمنت. خلينا اديك مثل ثاني. انت تقوم تعمل الخرط بتاعك، تجيب المهندس المعماري، تمام. تجيب الاستراكشر انجينير، تمام. تعمل التندر دوكيومنتس، تمام. ما ممكن تصحى ثاني يوم الصباح تقول والله انا ادوارد ما داير ابني بيت، لكن عايز اعمل مخزن. عشان اعمل مخزن داير استعمل نفس الخرط دي، نفس الجداول دي. ما بينفع. الجداول اللي انت عملته لبيت ما ممكن تجي تعمله لمخزن. ده بالضبط الحاصل دلوقتي. الديزاين بتاع جونجولي كانال والاكويبمنت الجاد كانت عشان تحفر قناه عشان المويه تمشي في النيل 4.5 مليار كيوبيك متر. ما ممكن ثاني يوم الصباح انت تقول والله نفس القناه ده اللي يتعمل ويتصمم عشان يشيل مويه يوديه مصر انا داير اعمله عشان يفضي المويه تحت الفلاتس. ما معقول. يعني ما في زول عاقل ممكن يعمل العمليه بالشكل ده. انت داير تفضي المويه بتاعت الفلاتس، اعمل ديزاين من الاول، اعمل دراسه من الاول، واعمل تصميم من الاول، وجيب مقاول من الاول، وجيب مكانات من الاول عشان تعمل الشغل اللي انت داير تعمله. لكن ما ممكن تشيل حاجه يتعمل عشان يكون بيت انت داير تعمله تكل ولا داير تعمله مخزن. ثانك يو.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. Uh, can you try to give us some example of of countries those suffer massive flood with destruction and loss of life, and how they actually address the situation. So the government of South Sudan also can actually benefit from this answer, and also the people of South Sudan. Thank you.
Right. خلينا ناخذ عندنا هنا في كندا، في غرب كندا، آه، في بريتش كولومبيا عندنا floods مؤلمة جدا. مئات الآلاف من الناس were evacuated. دلوقتي as we speak في إنذار على floods زيادة. في كمية من الأنهار هناك. الحكومة الكندية حكومة غنية جدا، نحن سادس أغنى دولة في العالم، عندنا قروش كثيرة جدا، ناس هنا مبسوطين. لكن القروش بتاعهم ده كله they never thought of dredging the rivers. They knew that floods are transitional, floods are occasional, floods are part of a cycle. ما في زول, no one in Canada thought of dredging the river or digging a canal. خلينا تاني نشيل استراليا. استراليا حصل فيه يعني they had a lot of floods, a lot of destruction. Just Google floods Australia. It will fill your screen. Australia never thought of dredging the rivers or taking the water somewhere else. Take England, إنجلترا، بلد كان بريطانيا العظمى. Queen Elizabeth has been ruling for 70 years. There are floods as we speak. They do dredging to clear their canals. That's a different story. And the water in England goes nowhere. It stays in England. It stays to evaporate to come as rain again. With South Sudan, that is not the case. Even if we agree that there is need for a canal, even if we agree that there is need for dredging, why? Where is the water going? People put the example of England, fine, we respect that. But the water in England is going nowhere. It is staying in the country. This is not the case with Jonglei Canal. So let us go back to the question again, the original question. Can you tell me the original question again, Edward?
Yeah, it was. Can you give us example of the countries that suffer massive floods with destruction and loss of life,
Right.
and how they address their situation? So that
Right.
also can help us
Right.
in addressing the situation in South Sudan too.
That's right. Right. Let us go to Australia. Australia suffered massive floods. They did not dig one canal. They did not dredge one river. They took care of the people. Immediately they mobilized, they declared the state of emergency, they mobilized and they helped the people and they relocated them. South Africa, when we are done, just Google floods in South Africa. Your screen will be full. The figure I had, the last had 800 people were killed. They died in the floods. And tens of thousands were homeless. They did not dredge 1 kilometer of any river, and they did not dig any canals. So to answer your question, the first thing and the first priority is to take care of the people who were affected. The second thing that any government will do is to think of the best options for addressing the situation. The best options might be to build dikes. The people in Bor now are building a dike. They built culverts because they found that the flooding was not from the river. The flooding was because the water was unable to go to the river. So it stayed in the homes and the market. And now they are doing culverts so that the water can actually pass through and go into the river. So we should not accuse the river before we know what is happening. So that's the other thing you do. You look at the situation. Is it the river that overflows its banks, or is it the water that could not get into the river? And then, if it is the water who could not get into the river, you will make sure that the water gets into the river. The second thing I will do, I would look at the lowlands. I would look at the runoff, what we call the runoff, where the water of the rain goes, and actually build the structures in those runoffs. So they obstructed them. They built the river for Bagar, they built homes, they built schools, and they obstructed the passage of the rainwater. So if the water cannot get to the final destination, which is a river, it will stay with the people. And then the other thing that they will do, other than the dikes, and of course the Dutch are very good with the issue of dikes. Regrettably, Holland hasn't got a cooperation agreement with South Sudan. They got fed up and they left. There is no money from them. But this is a humanitarian situation and they are concerned. So if I were the government of South Sudan, I will establish very good contact with the embassy of the Netherlands and see if they can help. But the immediate solution is to move the people into higher land. It doesn't have to be the land of other people. As I said, we have 335,000 square kilometers of area in South Sudan, and we're only 11 million people. So, as I said earlier, I used to drive from Kapoita to Narus. I wouldn't see more than 50 people in the road all the time, a drive of 2.5 or 3 hours. So there are lots of places that are empty, uninhabited. It may belong traditionally to tribes. You need to sit down and negotiate with them. And you can say, your brother in that area, they have been killed and destroyed by the floods. Can you please give them a piece of your land over here? If the approach is soft and if the approach respects the people, I don't think they will say no. So what the countries would do, they would first study the floods and the reason for them. They will mitigate the situation with those who were affected and help them. They will think of engineering designs, and the well-known one is the dikes, where you build a barrier so that the water does not come this way, but continues and goes another way. And the village or the town is safe. But the sensible one in the case of South Sudan is relocation of the population. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Prof Tag, for actually answering that question. And you have mentioned a very, very important point also in regard of mitigation, moving the people to the higher land. If actually before taking any step, the government should go and consult with the people, those actually you are expecting to move the affected people to their place. So respect them, discuss with them, tell them the importance of the situation and why do we need this. Because earlier you were mentioning the flood of 2015, the drought, sorry, of 2015 in Jonglei area. And also part of Eastern Equatoria. It wasn't only Jonglei area, and also part of Eastern Equatoria. And I have data when I was in the Juba, we talk about it in Juba actually, of this kind of the series of drought. So you are right. If we have legitimate government in the country, they respect people, go and sit down with them. After the visibility study, I think nobody will actually say anything. So thank you, really, and that was very important. The question before the last question, there was recently 21 trucks of equipment with the drag line are claimed to have arrived in Bantiu, Rabokone area. Tell us what do you know about those equipment as engineer Prof Tag?
Right. Before I go into this question, let me share with you that as we speak now, there is a drought in northern Kenya.
Yes.
And northern Kenya is almost right on the equator. So the more you get to the equator, the more rain you should have. But actually, right now, we have a drought. We have another very interesting phenomena in Lake Turkana. You know, if you are coming from Ethiopia into Moyale, Once you leave Mayali, you are into the Turkana area. And Lake Turkana itself is rising. The lake is rising. However, there is a drought around Lake Turkana. In this area, there is something that we call Karamoja cluster. These are tribes that left Ethiopia about 600 years back, and they are living in that belt. They are in South Sudan, they are in northern Kenya, they are in northern Uganda, and they are called the Karamoja cluster. There is drought there. There is drought that affected the people and affected the animals, while Lake Turkana is rising. So these natural phenomena are uncontrollable by man. You cannot make them happen or not happen, but you can deal with them and live with them. Right. And your question was the equipment.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, the equipment came from Egypt. First, it came through Argin. Argin is a crossing point between northern Sudan and Egypt. The Sudanese government refused to let them go through because there is no trade agreement between Sudan and South Sudan. It has not been implemented yet. Somehow, the trucks disappeared from Argin, and they managed to go through until they came to South Kordofan. They were held by the Miseria, and whoever shipped that equipment and owned the trucks had to pay a ransom. The ransom was paid to the Miseria. So the Miseria let the truck and the 22 people go. There are 21 trucks with 21 drivers, but there is an additional person who hasn't got a truck. He must be the boss. And they came through until they entered through Rapcona, and they came to Bentiu. The total load on those trucks is 225 tons. It has two huge 50-ton dredging machines. It has four huge barges for taking the silt and the debris away. It constitutes 94 line elements. It has a very powerful tugboat and a lot of spare parts, a lot of additional equipment, a lot of wires, a lot of other smaller implements, a total of 94 line items. The shipping company that shipped this on the trucks is called the Liwa Al Abyad. It is a company owned by a Sudanese man and it's operating out of Cairo. And I have the address and I have the telephone numbers and I have the name of the owner. All that is in the waybill. I managed to get a copy of the waybill through someone that I sent to Argin. This equipment came to Rapcona before any study, pre-feasibility or feasibility. No study was done. The equipment is claimed to be part of a technical cooperation agreement. The value of the technical cooperation agreement, I am told, is $26.6 million. And that the value of the equipment, the 225 tons, is about $4.5 million. Who owns it is not clear. How was it tendered? It's not clear. Is the value of the $4.5 million a true value? It is not clear. But now we have a very big problem in our hands, and that we have got equipment that's 225 tons that is in South Sudan soil. Let me share with you a very strange consignee. The equipment is not sent to the government of South Sudan. The equipment is not sent in the waybill. It is not sent to the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. The equipment is sent to the mission, and I want you to listen carefully, to the mission of the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation of Egypt in South Sudan. So there is an Egyptian mission of water resources in South Sudan, and they are the ones to whom the equipment is actually sent. What they do with it is still not yet clear to me, and probably the people of South Sudan or the government an explanation of who actually owns this equipment. How did the equipment come? Who assembled it? Is the value equitable? What is happening to the rest of the $26.6 million? Hafiz were supposed to be dug. Some were dug, others were not dug. What is happening to the rest of the money? Does the Ministry of Water Resources have a bank account where the money is kept? Do they have signatures? All that is a black hole. It's a black box. So this is actually a worrying thing. I have been informed a couple of days back that there is a government policy. I don't know what the policy was based on. We have to find out. To dredge from Mongala to Juba and to dredge Bahr al-Ghazal Basin for navigational purposes. Okay. The River Transport Corporation was established in 1912 and started operating in around 1913. The draft is the depth to which the vessel goes into the water. So the part of the boat that goes into the water, all the vessels of the River Transport Corporation is only 4 feet, 120 centimeters, 1 meter and 20 centimeters. That's all. There was nothing that goes deeper than that. You want to dredge? Be my guest, but don't go over 1.2 meters. If the objective is actually for navigational purposes. And the big question is, why do you want to dredge between Mongala and Juba where you have a road on the other side? So the equipment is actually a sitting problem, and the best solution for that is, if it is owned by the government of South Sudan, if it is owned by Egypt, I would personally send it back. If it is owned by the government of South Sudan, then it should not be assembled in Bentiu. It should be kept as pieces until a study is done and until the study informs us of what is the best utilization that South Sudan can have for this equipment. Let me add that if the equipment is a gift from the people of Egypt to the people of South Sudan, that's fine. If somebody gives you a gift, it's a sandwich or a Land Rover, you will accept it and you will say thank you very much. But then, as it is ours, we should not hurry and say, well, now we have equipment, let us see where you can use it. No, that's the reverse approach. You start from the beginning, you do the study, you do the design, and then you see what elements of this equipment can help you implement the design that you have done. So the equipment is actually in Bentiu now. Our call as civil society has been for it. I use the term quarantine. It should be kept in quarantine under the safeguard of the government of South Sudan until a feasibility study is done, a credible feasibility study is done, and then we will see what parts of this equipment can actually be of help in the feasibility study. Thank you.
Yeah, Prof, really, I want you to actually explain that question in Arabic so the people of South Sudan can actually get the answer, because there is literally concern about this equipment. And really, as we, people of South Sudan, the government actually, they will not explain the reality of those equipment to the people of South Sudan. So that while really we want to take this opportunity from you to answer the question of the public actually. So it's good also يعني because we remain with the last question. Please حاول تجاوب لنا بالعربي لأنه الناس في جنوب السودان هم دايرين كان يعني يعرفوا ما وراء الآليات الجات من مصر زي ما انت شرحته قبل شويه. فالحته ده برضه بيكون انت جاوبت السؤال بتاع الشارع والاهتمام بتاع الشعب بتاع جنوب السودان اللي اصلا ما تلقى اجابه من حكومتهم انه الاجهزه دي وراء شنو زي ما انت قبل شويه شرحته كويس بانجليزي. انا داير تشرحه بالعربي. قبل في ناس كتبوا لي انه خلي البروف يتكلم بالعربي لكن انا قلت we designed an interview to be actually in English عشان برضو the international community they can actually get it from professor here and those in the region also. There is some people in South Sudan they don't actually speak Arabic well and also they can get it, but it's good Prof also can try to answer some important question in Arabic after English. So تفضل دكتور.
ألف شكر. أول حاجة يعني حقه نكون حريصين ما نتهم الناس. يعني أنا الليل استلمت جواب بتاع دعوة من دكتور برنابا مريال ودكتور برنابا and I we go back a long way. I have a lot of respect for him and for all the other people. He is inviting me to come to South Sudan for awareness and consultations, which shows that the government might either having second thoughts or they did not have any thoughts before and they want to have the ability to have informed decisions. And as and when I have a contract and my logistics are done, أول ما يعني نرجع للعربي إننا ما دارين نتهم في الحقيقة ناس الحكومة ساكت. وأنا كنت بقول إنه يعني الليلة أنا استلمت دعوة كريمة من دكتور بنجامين برنابا مريال، رجل فاضل جدا and I have a lot of respect for him، يعني أحترمه شديد. ودعوة بيقول لي تعال نقعد معي هنا كده كم يوم عشان نتشاور. فده معناتها الحكومة دايرة تشوف حل ومهتمية بالموضوع. لكن فعلا العدة اللي وصل في بانتيو، جاء داخل برابكونا، وعدة جاي من مصر، والعدة وزن بتاعه 225 طن، وفيه 94 ايتمز 94 ايتم، فيهم 2 كراكات كبار ده بتاع الحفر، فيه 4 صندل كبير. الصنادل ده بيخطوا فيه كراكه بيعوم في المويه، ولا الصندل بيخطوا فيه التراب والطين الطين والحشائش اللي بيطلعوه بيخطوه في الصندل ده عشان يرموه بعيد. العده ده الشركه شحنته اسمه اللواء الابيض ومقرهم القاهره، والمالك بتاع اللواء الابيض دي هي شركه بتاعت شحن، هو سوداني، والبيانات بتاعه كله عندنا، اسم بتاعه عندنا، عنوان بتاعه، تلفونات بتاعه، ايميل بتاعه، كله موجود عندنا هنا. طيب ال 94 دي 94 ايتم دي فيها معدات، فيها اللانش ضخم جدا 16 متر، حكايه كبيره طويله جدا، حكايه قويه. ده كله جاء وكله موجود في الويبل، والويبل موجود. كلام اننا سمعناه انه القيمه بتاع العده ده هو 4.5 مليون دولار. ما في تفاصيل توري هل هو فعلا 4.5 مليون ولا 2 مليون ولا 1 مليون، ده ما في. انا ما لقيته وما في زول قدر يديني له، وفي الويبل ما مذكور، الفاليو بتاعه ما مذكور. بعدين برضه كلام سمعناه انه ده جزء من حاجه اسمه تكنيكال كوبريشن اجريمنت، التعاون الفني ما بين مصر والسودان، وده اتفاق ممضي. بموجب الاتفاق ده مصر بدي جنوب السودان 26 مليون و600 ألف دولار. عدة ده مفروض يكون جزء من القيمة دي. وين الاتفاقية دي؟ ما قدرنا نلقى محل بتاع اتفاقية. ما في اتفاقية بتاع الناس بيكون مسوس. تدسوا ليه؟ تدسوا يا خالد، زول خايف من شنو يعني؟ زول انا طلبت الاتفاقية المفروض يدوني اتفاقية. وات از رونج؟ داير اعمل تحليل لمصلحة بتاع الناس بتاع جنوب السودان. فباقي القروش ده مشى وين؟ قال المفروض يحفروا حفاير، جزء من الحفاير اتحفر، جزء من الحفاير ما اتحفر في زول مسؤول قال لي جزء كبير من الحفاير ما اتحفر. حفاير يتحفر ذات الديزاين بتاعه تعمل كيف. الحفير ما لعب، الحفير تاب تجيب مكنه وتحفر حفر، الحفير اذا دام خزان. طيب العده ده دلوقتي جاء. الحاجه الغريبه في الحقيقه في العمليه دي، انا لما قريت الويبي كله بالعربي. الجهه الشاحنه من هناك الشركه انا حاولت اشوفها في الويب سايت، ما عندها ويب سايت. لكن الناس اللي بيرسلوا لهم العده ده ما حكومه بتاع جنوب السودان ولا وزاره بتاع المويه. الناس اللي بيرسلوا لهم هو بعثه وزاره المياه والري المصريه في جنوب السودان. يعني الجهه بيرسلوا عده ده مصريه من القاهره، وجهه بيرسل له الحاجات ده بعثه مصريه قاعده في جنوب السودان. اسم بتاع حكومه جنوب السودان ما في الويبيل، اسم بتاع الوزاره ما في الويبيل. فانا دلوقتي سالت السكرتري بتاع الوزاره، خدت له اسئله كثيره، واحد منه عدد بتاع منه وطلبوا منه، واذا كان طلبته حكومه بتاع جنوب السودان هل نزل في بابليك تندر ولا ما نزل. وبعدين السبب اللي خلى يده يجي في الاول حتى بعدين دراسه ثانيه تعمل. السيد الوزير قال نحن طلبنا نعمل دراسه، السيد الوكيل قال دارين نعمل دراسه. انت بتعمل دراسه في الاول حتى بعدين تجيبوا عده، ما بتجيبوا عده ساكت. انت الليله لو دايروا تبنوا بيت، انت بتقعد مع مرة بتاعك، بتقعد مع الاطفال بتاعينك، مع اصحابك، مع اهلك، وتفكروا في الحكايه دي. اسمه الفكره بتاع المشروع. بعدين انت بتجيب مهندس معماري، مهندس المعماري بيجي يعمل لك الرسومات وبيعمل لك الصالون وين ومطبخ وين وحمامات وين. بعدين انت بتجيب المهندس بتاع التصميم الانشائي، ده بوريك العواميد وبوريك الحديد بتاع التسليح وبيوريك عشان البنيان بتاعك ده ما يقع. وبعدين بيجيبوا كونتراكتور، بيجيبوا مقاول. المقاول بيقول لك والله انا داير منك 200,000 دولار، وده عده انا بجيبه عشان انفذ به المشروع. فعده بيجي عشان ينفذ مشروع معين، عده ما بيجي في الاول حتى بعدين انت تفكر في المشروع. ده حكايه بقى مقلوبه. ده الحاجه الاولى. الحاجه الثانيه زي ما قلنا، حتى اذا كان في تفكير، التفكير كان لشنو؟ يعني انت لما تعمل ديزاين لحاجه بتنفذ الحاجه دي، ما بتنفذ حاجه ثانيه. هل العده ده كان جاي لجنجولي؟ هل لسه جاي لجنجولي؟ هل جاي بس لبحر الغزال؟ ليه بحر الغزال بس؟ ما في فلس جاي بورده غيرك، المنطقه ده كله بتاع لو نوير ده هنا كله في جنجولي كله غيرك. العده ده هيجي بعدين بيجاي ولا هيقعد ثاني بهناك؟ ويقطع يجي بيجاي كيف؟ ما في كوبري محل كله مليان مويه. وفي الحقيقه في اسئله اكثر من اجوبه في موضوع ده، والناس المواطن بتاع جنوب السودان له الحق يعرف. حكومه، الناس بتاع علم بتاع السياسه بيقول الحكومه بتاع الناس من اجل الناس ولصالح الناس. الحكومه بتاعنا المفروض يكون كده، وانا ما عندي شك ان الحكومه بتاعنا دي النيه بتاعتها النيه بتاعها كويس، لكن محتاجين لتوضيح. بعدين انت لو الشعب واقف بوراك حكومه بيكون قوي، لو الشعب ما واقف بوراك حكومه بيكون ضعيف. زي اذا كان عندك حيطه داير تقع، انت داير تاخد فيه ميرك كبير، قطعه كبيره بتاعت خشب عشان ما يقع، ده الشعب هو بيسند الحكومه. نحن الدور بتاعنا نحن واقفين مع الناس ومستعدين ننصح الحكومه لو طلبت النصيحه. وانا في الحقيقه عندي تقدير كبير جدا للاخ الكريم الدكتور برنابا، وانا على تواصل معه. وزي ما ذكرت اليوم انا استلمت خطاب موقع منه ومختوم بيدعوني للحضور الى جوبا في اوائل شهر 7، وانا مستعد امشي، منتظر وقع عقد ومنتظر التفاصيل بتاعت الترحيل والتذاكر والاقامه والامن والحاجات دي، وما عندي مانع عشان امشي. لكن الناس زالت تتراقب على انه المعدات دي تكون محفوظة لحد ما الدراسة تتعمل. الدور بتاعنا نحن كناس يعني واعيين في وسط الشعب، نتاكد على انه العده ده يكون مقفول. انت استعملت كارنتينا تاخده في كارنتينا زي الزول عنده مرض، خده في كارنتينا، خد عليه حراسه من الاس بي ال اي لحد ما نعرف بالضبط نحن نعمل به شنو. الف شكر.
طيب يا بروف، فولو اب كويشن، يعني هل انت تعتقد انه مثلا العده دي بعد ما جات وجابوها ممكن يخطوها في كرنتين وتقعد مثلا، يعني الضرر بتاع التخزين مثلا عليه ممكن يكون شنو؟ انت بتعرف يعني ما عندنا مشكله بتاع كونكريت بيلدينج ان دوز ارياس، وبرضه الرطوبه عاليه، درجه الحراره عاليه. تعليقك شنو على التخزين؟ لانه بعد ما انت جبتها المفروض تجيب تعمل feasibility assessment study first، اللي هي environmental and social وكده. فانت ما عملتها وانت جبتها طوال مشيت، انت نطيت كل الخطوات دي مراحل دي، وانت مشيت المرحله الاخيره، المرحله بتاع انك تجيب الاكويبمنت. المفروض الاكويبمنت تجي وطوالي بتبدا الشغل، لانه انت لما تجيبها ولا الناس اللي بيجيبوا الاكويبمنت والمهندسين هيجوا بيكونوا قاعدين في الجنوب، ما معروف فتره كم الدراسه دي ممكن تاخذ كم ثانيه، وانت بتعرف الدراسات دي مثلا يعني ما حاجه سهله وكده. فده كله بيكون على منو يعني؟ ما يعني انا دايرك برضو، لانه انا قبل بيحترم اجابتك قبل شويه، لانه فعلا انت لما بتجي هنا كضيف زول فني تكنيكال فقط، بنحترم ذلك، بنخليك بس في تخليك في مجال الفني، ما دايرين ندخلك معنا في السياسه وكده. باقي حاجات ثانيه بنقوله انت لما تكون برا منه، لكن دايرينك تجاوب لنا كزول انجينير، وانت اشتغلت على الحته بتاع التخزين دي ودرجات الحراره والرطوبه العاليه ودي كلها. تفضل.
اول حاجه قبل ما العده تصل، انا وصلني معلومات على انه يعني في موقع بتاع هندسه بتاع مقاوله يتعمل في بنتيو. وبعدين حتى لو عينت في الصور اللي بدات تطلع المباني دي واضحه. فبعدين برضو ده انت ما بتعمل يعني موقع هندسي ما لم تكن داير تعمل مشروع هندسي. فبكل للاسف مش بس الاكويبمنت جات قبل الدراسه، حتى الموقع الهندسي اتعمل قبال ما الدراسه تتعمل. نجي لسؤالك مباشره اللي هو عمليه التخزين. دي معدات في الحقيقه ثقيله جدا، يعني فتره بتاعت سنه ونص سنتين ما بتاثر فيها. بعدين طبعا في طرق عشان انت تحمل حديد. ممكن ترشه بزيت، بتجيب مكنه كومبريسر ومسدس بتاع كومبريسر، وبترش الحاجات دي كلها بال
يا بروف الفيديو بتاعك انت دوس حاجه.
يا
يس يا يو باك ناو.
يا رايت سوري.
يا ذات
انت ممكن ترشه بزيت، او ممكن تعمل فيه شحم بيحميه. بعدين في حاجات بروتكتيف بتحمي من الصدى، انت برضه ممكن تجيب السوائل دي وترش العده. ممكن تعمل مخازن مقفله، يعني سريع ممكن يتعمل جملون بالزنك، ومثلا البود دي الصندل ذاته ممكن بالمكنه ممكن يخش فيه ويتحفظ هناك. في كميه من الحاجات تحت الاكل والشراب جات عشان ال 22 نفر ديل، لانه المفروض هم اللي يركبوا المعدات دي. هل يركبوها ويشغلوها ولا يركبوها بس؟ ده لسه ما معروف. يركبوها بس كويستشن مارك صغير، علامة استفهام صغير. يركبوها ويشغلوها عندنا مشكله كبيره. يشغلوها عشان يعملوا شنو؟ العمل الدراسه بتاع المويه منه، بتاع النهر منه، كميه بتاع الطين وين؟ انت حتمشي تحت قدر شنو؟ الدور بتاع الوزاره في الحكايه دي كله شنو؟ الوزاره از نوت كونتراكتور. الوزاره بكره لو ادوها الاكويبمنت دي، انا لو الوزير ما بشيلها، ما في كاباسيتي. ده ما شغل بتاع وزاره، ده شغل بتاع كونتراكتور. الدراسات شغل بتاع كونسلتنت، والكونتراكتنج شغل بتاع كونتراكتور. ما في طريقه عشان يتعامل بدايركت ليبر تقوم تجيب معدات. بتوروا معدات ده منه؟ ففي الحقيقة السؤال كويس، لكن احنا حسب ما عندنا وضع غير مثالي، يعني الوضع ما هو أحسن وضع. نحن بنحاول نتعامل مع الشيء الواقع على الأرض. فطلاء المواد دي بالزيت عشان ما تصدي، وحفظها في أماكن آمنة داخل المخازن، ده هو الإجابة على سؤالك. ألف شكر.
شكرا. Thank you so much, Prof Tag. Actually, I have only last question, and then I will take like 5 questions from the audience, and then we conclude the interview. And actually, now the equipment is physically in Bantu. For you, what is your advice to make the best out of a messy situation, in your view, Prof Tag?
Right. شوف، أسلم طريقة هو التعبير اللي أنا استعملته to quarantine the equipment. المعدات دي بغض النظر عن المالك منه، مالكها المصريين، مالكها الوزارة، مالك كونتراكت، ده حسه خلاص نحن ده اتعديناه. The best thing is to keep this equipment under guard so that A, it does not go operational before a study, and B, it does not get pilferaged, it does not get stolen. Some of the parts are كوابل وحاجات بشكل. There is a lot of cable, there are a lot of wires, there are a lot of light items. This can be snatched and sold outside. So to protect the equipment and to protect the people and to protect South Sudan, the best thing to do now is to keep it under lock, under storage, under the guard of the government of the South Sudan until a feasibility study is done and an informed decision about the way forward is taken by the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Actually, thank you for answering the question. And actually, you have been with me here for 1 hour and almost 40 minutes. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to take some questions from the audience. I have people actually on Facebook with me. Some of them also watching from YouTube. And we have listener in Clubhouse. There is a question here from, the first question is the question from Aban Shan. She actually watching with us here in Facebook. And she asking, was Sudan consulted about the dredging? Because it's one of the signatory in the 1959 Nile River Agreement. And what is the impact of the dredging on the Sudan, in your view, Prof?
Right.
That is a question.
Right. Let me start by an introduction to the answer. The share of Sudan when it was united was 18.5 billion cubic meters of water every year. All that water was going to Sudan North. After separation and during the negotiations of the CPA, the issue of sharing that water if South Sudan goes its way was never discussed. If you go back to the CPA, 261 pages. That's the agreement and the implementation matrix. There is no mention about that. And the reason was the wisdom of Dr. John Garang. He thought that this is going to create trouble, and that all he wanted was to sign the agreement and to have the referendum and the South Sudanese to go their own way, then we will deal with the rest. So that issue was never discussed. The normal thing under the 1959 agreement, or just common sense, is that if part of the country goes its own way and they took their oil, well, they should take at least the right of part of the water, part of the 18.5 billion cubic meters. That never happened, and it was never discussed. Let us come to Sudan. If there is a sudden gush of water on the White Nile comes in Sudan, it comes through very flat land, different from the Blue Nile, that comes from hilly areas in the Red Sea and around Adbara, going into Kasala, Gatarib. All those are hilly areas. But the White Nile, there are no hills. There is a place called Jabalain, and that's it. The rest is really flat land. So if there is a sudden gush of water, if there are 2 billion cubic meters all of a sudden released, that might flood the low shores of the White Nile, especially in the southern parts, south of Kosti. Because if you look at the Nile south, if you stand in Kosti, in the jetty, and you look south, you will see that the White Nile is very wide. So if you bring more water there, it might drown Kosti. That's not the main danger. There is one dam south of Nimuli on the White Nile, and that's at Jebalolia. Jebalolia Dam was not an irrigation dam or a hydro dam. It was built as something they call it the regulator. It was built by the Egyptians to regulate the water that is coming from the south on the Nile, on the White Nile, and to store it until it is needed in Egypt. So it was an Egyptian installation in Sudanese land. The story gets repeated all the time. And then when Sudan became independent and the Egyptians built the high dam and they have a massive lake of 174 billion cubic meters, enough for the water supply of Egypt for 5 years, the Jebel Dam became redundant. So the Egyptian mission there left Sudan and they gave the dam to the Sudanese. They put very small turbines and they are generating about 5 megawatt of electricity from that dam. Not very much. And if there is a sudden gush of water that the dam cannot take, that will collapse the dam, especially it is a very old dam. I think it was built in the 1930s. So it is close to 100 years old now. So any disturbance that challenges its strength, the Sudan could actually have a problem. To answer the question, no, there have been no consultations whatsoever so far. Sudan is embroiled in their own problems and they are trying to find a sense of direction. Nobody knows or really cares about the White Nile or about Jonglei Canal right now. But there is definitely a potential danger if there is a large gush of water coming down the Nile. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I like the last comment. Nobody cares in Sudan.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
that's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. There is and the second question. The question is from James P. Lomowa. Actually, he asking why do even South Sudan government are trying to dredge the canal, yet they can't even afford to supply clean running water to their people. If you are able to answer that question, Prof.
I will answer it scientifically and diplomatically. Scientifically, in the economic term, and diplomatically, as we said at the outset, that we are not into the party politics. The, the question was posed in a different way. Is Jonglei Canal really a priority for the people of South Sudan now? Because if we are talking about the government of South Sudan, we are making a mistake. Well, no, I never talk about the government of South Sudan. It's the people of South Sudan. I mean, it's the people who own the land. It's the people who own the water. It's the people who put the government in place. So our frame of reference is a better frame of reference. There is more justice in it if we are dealing with the people of South Sudan. So I will take it from that dimension. It is certainly not a priority for the people of South Sudan. And there is a story, I don't know if I shared it with you, Edward, last time. Let me repeat it. I'm very passionate about it. Coleman Young asked me to go around the 11 counties of Jonglei and see what do the people want, what is their priority. So I did that. I went to 7 of the counties and I went to 7 payams in the 7 counties. And I used to ask I asked to meet with community leaders, men and women, traditional and civil model. And I would ask the question, what is your number one priority? What do you want? And in all the 7 counties, in all the 7 payams, all the people, they had one common priority, and that's to have a midwife in every village, because women were dying, children, newborns were dying because they pulled them out with a rope. And in Niwai, I will never forget that day. In Niwai, in Urur County, there were 17 community leaders in the room. And when I asked the question, they all said a midwife. And when I said, among you, the 17, who lost a mother at birth and who lost a child at birth? And all of them raised their hands. Everyone. Minister Manawa Peter Jatkot was standing beside me in that interview. And if the people want midwives so that their children and daughters do not die, you do not go for Jonglei Canal. Definitely not. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. There is a question before the last question from the audience. The question actually is from Makir Mabil. Actually, the question is Arabic. I want you to answer the question in Arabic so you can get it. والسؤال بتاعه بروف هو قاعد يقول طبعا هو من إدارية بتاع روين، وأنت بتعرف المنطقة بتاع روين كويس لأنه أنت اشتغلت مناطق كله. فهو قاعد يقول ماذا يمكن أن يفعل إدارة روين حتى يستفيد من بحيرة بتاع ليغنو، علما إن هنالك من الليغنو
حتى يستفيد
حتى يستفيد الناس بتاعت مواطنين بتاع روين لأنه أصلا إدارية قايم بذاتها، هم ممكن يستفيدوا شنو من ليغنو لأنهم هم جزء من الليغنو في رأيه. يعني أنت رأيك شنو في الحتة دي؟
شوف، طبعا لو عندك اي ليك، حتى لو نحن بنسميها ترانزيشنال ليك، اللي هي ليك انت المويه بتتجمع فيها وبعدين بيمشي محل ثاني. السمك، يعني المنطقه ده فيه سمك كثير جدا. لو تشوف البلط بتاعه قدر شنو، بعدين القشر بتاعه ابيض، بعدين اي سماكي كويس عارف المنطقه ممكن يقبض 100 سمكه في اليوم لو داير. الحاجه الثانيه، في مناطق فيه تماسيح، الجلي بتاع التمساح ده برا غالي. اللحم بتاع التمساح ذاته بيتاكل. يعني انا في كينيا عده مرات اكلت اللحم بتاع التمساح، والناس بتاعنا في الجنوب ياكلوا اللحم بتاع التمساح. فالاستفاده الاولى في تقديري هي الاستفاده من الثروه السمكيه الموجوده. الناحيه الثانيه، لانه في مويه وفي حشائش في المنطقه بتاعت ليك نو، ممكن يكون في رعايه بتاعت ابقار. واذا كان جنوب السودان قرر على انه يصدر اللحمه، الخليج ده كله ما فيه لحمه، اللحمه بتاعه كله بيجي من برا، بيجي من نيوزيلندا، وبيجي من اوروبا، بيجي من الصومال. برضه ممكن يكون في المسلخ اللي هو انت بتطبخ البهايم فيه وبتجهز اللحمه بطريقه مقبوله في الاسواق، وبيجي طيارات بيشيلوا بيمشي بيه. فانا افتكر ديل الحاجتين، يعني الانتباه للثروه السمكيه والناس تعملها بصوره عشان نوت اوفر فيش، ما تكمل السمك كله. والحاجه الثانيه التربيه بتاعت البهايم، والمسلخ حتى ممكن يكون مسلخ صغير على اساس 100 طن في السنه، 150 طن في السنه، لكن الفوائد بتاعته عاليه جدا. الف شكر.
في سؤال من قاسم دعك، وهو قاعد يقول ما هو الموقف القانوني والدستوري والنتائج المترتبة على هذا الأرض بالنسبة لأبناء جنوب السودان. أنا دايرك تضيف سؤال ثاني له هو قبل كتبه، أنا ما أعرف اسم الزول ده منه، فهو كان قاعد يقول الزول ترى السؤال له أنا بروفيسور، هو قاعد يقول كده خليك تجاوب على السؤال ده، أنا بفتش السؤال ده لأنه مهم جدا إنك تجاوب على السؤال ده. تفضل بروف.
طيب نحن عندنا الجزء بتاع الانترناشونال لو، يعني السودان ملزم بأنه يحترم القانون الدولي، و ما يعني ما ممكن كده. قول لي سؤال ثاني عشان اكون شارب. قول لي سؤال ثاني بالله.
يا هو قاعد يقول ما هو الموقف القانوني
رايت
والدستوري.
رايت
يس
اوكي
يس.
اوكي ثانك يو فيري ماتش. طيب نحن عندنا 7 قوانين دولية ذات صلة مع الوضع بتاع المياه في جنوب السودان. القانون الأول هو ترانس باوندري أكوافيرز، ده موية تحت الوطن، ده طلع في 2009. القانون الثاني هو اليو ان كونفنشن، الاتفاقية بتاع الأمم المتحدة 1997، ده بينظم ال 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 الإدارة بتاعت الأنهار العابرة للدول، يعني زي النهر البحر الأبيض، النيل الأبيض ده جاينا من يوغندا، بيجي داخل علينا في نيمولي. عندنا بيبور ده جاينا من اثيوبيا. ده 1997. بعدين عندنا القانون بتاع اليونايتد نيشنز فور نون نافيجيشنال يوزز، ده لو عندك نهر عابر للحدود ولاسباب ما مربوطه بالسفن. بعدين عندك اليونسكو رامسار كونفنشن، ده بيشتغل بالويت لاندز، والسد عندنا هو اكبر ويت لاندز، يعني مناطق بتاعت سدود او بتاعت مياه راكده في افريقيا كلها. عندنا حاجه ثانيه مهمه جدا، يمكن هي الاجابه المباشره للسؤال، حاجه اسمها فيينا كونفنشن اون ذا سكسيشن اوف ستيتس. ده بيقول شنو؟ ده بيقول لو كان في دوله كانت جزء من دوله كبيره زي حاله بتاع السودان وجنوب السودان، وبعدين جزء من الدوله ده انفصل مشى زي ما حصل في جنوب السودان، وفي اتفاقيات كانت البلد مضتها واتفقت عليها والتزمت بها لما كانت دولة واحدة. وضع بتاع ناس جداد ده بتاع بلد جديد ده هو بيكون شنو؟ ده كلنا لازم نقرا الفيينا كونفنشن دي، لانه في التزامات لما لا يمكن ان تهمل. لما 1959 اتمضت، هم طبعا اتفاقيتين 1929 و 1959. نهر النيل ذاته من 1902 عنده 9 اتفاقيات. اي زول مهتم بالشان بتاع جنوب السودان المفروض يكون عارف ال9 اتفاقيات دي وتواريخها، بدات 1902 او 1898 اي دونت ريمبر، لكن في 9 او 10 اتفاقيات دي احنا بنسميها ريجونال. فالفيينا كونفنشن ده اهم واحد عشان جنوب السودان يعرف التزاماته شنو في ال 1959 اجريمنت، وحتى في الكولونيال اجريمنتس القديمه دي. لو تتذكروا حاجه اسمها بادمي دي بلد صغيره بين اثيوبيا واريتريا، قام فيه دشمان ماتوا فيه قريب من 10,000 ولا 30,000، وبقت مشكله كبيره جدا، ومشت التحكيم في الهيج في هولندا وحكموا لاريتريا. الاثيوبيين قالوا لا، نحن الحكم ده ما بننفذه، لحد ما حس ابي احمد قبل اللي ينفذ الحكم وادى الوطن للاثيوبيين. الاتفاق بتاع بادمي ده اساسا كان مبني على الكولونيال اجريمنتس، فالحاجات تمت في زمن الاستعمار قابله للتنفيذ، قابله لانها تؤخذ في الاعتبار. بعدين في حاجه اسمها ووتر كونفنشن 1992، ده برضه اتفاقيه مهمه. فاجابه على السؤال بتاع السيد الفاضل، نحن عندنا 7 اتفاقيات، يعني محتاجين نعرفها ونعرف التزاماتنا فيها شنو. وعندنا عدة اتفاقيات محلية أو إقليمية، رابطة بريطانيا مع أثيوبيا، رابطة تلاينة مع البريطانيين، كمية منهم. الحاجة الثانية اللي دايرين ننبه لها ما دام نحن واقفين في الحتة دي، أنه أنا عندي في الأركايفز تحتي هنا في 27 ريفر بيسن، 27 نهر في أفريقيا عندها اتفاقيات عشان تنظم التشغيل بتاعها. نهر النيل هو النهر الوحيد اللي ما عنده اتفاقية تنظم التشغيل بتاعه، والنايل بيسن انيشيتيف هو المسؤول من الحكاية دي، والاتفاقية جاهزة واقفة في سب كلوز اسمها 14 بي. المصريين عندهم فيرجن وباقي الدول عندها فيرجن ثاني. جنوب السودان ما ماضي في الاتفاق ده، والسؤال الأكبر أنه الناس الماضيين في الاتفاق كلهم هو الدول الأفريقية. مصر والسودان معترضين ما دارين يمضوا. طيب أنت واقف وين؟ أنت كجنوب السودان أنت مع مصر والسودان ولا مع الدول الأفريقية؟ سؤال محتاج لإجابة، الإجابة ما عندي أنا. ألف شكر.
شكرا بروف تاج. Let me take this last question. I think it's a very important question from Guet Tong Yi. Is asking, with the presence of weak civil society and the parliament in South Sudan, how can international community help silent majority in South Sudan? Professor Tai.
How can the UN help the silent majority?
How can international community help the silent majority in South Sudan?
Yeah. Right. طيب الحاجة الأولى ده personal opinion. أنا ما بعرف حاجة اسمها international community في الغرب. international community ده كلمة كبيرة الناس جابوا دخلوه عشان والله مش الغربي بس، مش أمريكا وأوروبا واليابان، ده الغرب. لكن international community في منو ثاني عنده قروش، في منو ثاني بيعمل دشمان ولا بوقف دشمان. فأنا personally ضد التعبير بتاع الانترناشونال كوميونتي. في انترناشونال اورجنايزيشنز. لكن خلينا مجازا نتكلم let us talk about the international community. International community right now, and if we're talking about the United Nations, or even if we're talking about issues outside of America. And as you know, they pulled out overnight. In a few days, they pulled out of Afghanistan. And now there is the war in the Ukraine. They are sending equipment, but they are not sending even one American soldier. So we have a term in political science called fatigue. Fatigue that when people are tired. So there is donor fatigue, where the donors, the people who are supplying the money, they feel, for how long are we going to give South Sudan? More dangerous than the donor fatigue is what we call compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is the sympathy. حتى even التعاطف بقى ما موجود. I was talking to someone in Washington DC, and he said the situation of South Sudan now is in the area of compassion fatigue. People don't care. There have been so much trouble coming out and continuous, even after separation, even after independence, that the people are really sick and tired. So first of all, we need to be careful who is with us is what we call the international community and what I call the West. Number two, what do you want them to do? Take a country like the Netherlands, Holland. Holland gave so much. They built roads, they built bridges, they did so much benefit to South Sudan. And right now, as we speak, they don't have a joint cooperation between South Sudan and Holland. They pulled out. We have got to ask these questions, and we have got to ask why, and we have got to put ourselves in the shoes of these countries. There is accountability. As a Canadian citizen here in Canada, I can write to the Prime Minister and I can tell him to go to hell if I feel that he's mismanaging my taxpayers' money. So there is accountability from the people. They don't just pour money. This is not the Middle East. This is not the Gulf. This is not Saudi Arabia or the Emirates where the sheikh can do what he wants with the money. So that's the first part. The second part of the international community is the international organizations, which is the United Nations. The United Nations, the attention given to South Sudan, which is what I call a malignant case. I mean, the issues of South Sudan have been dragging on for a very long time. And the people are really sick and tired. And now the attention is on Afghanistan, the attention is on Ukraine, the attention is on Iraq, the attention is on Syria, the attention is on Ethiopia, the attention is on Yemen. Who is talking about South Sudan? No one. No one. And if you go into the website of the mission, you will know the width and breadth of the work they are doing. But let me confirm to you, I wouldn't go into details on that because of professional reasons. The United Nations are concerned, and the United Nations would like to help the government of South Sudan. And the United Nations are aware of what is going on, and they are looking for what we call best options of how they engage. They have a massive history of dealing with issues, and I am sure with the right approach, they can come out and help. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Like I said earlier, that will be the last question. But actually, there is a question here from Peter Ayuer Panchol, and that question also is connected with actually you are going to South Sudan. Like you confirmed earlier to the viewers, you received today invitation from government of South Sudan, and you will be going to Juba for further consultation with the government institution in the country, including the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation in South Sudan. I want to ask this question because if it's one of your suggestions you are going to give to the government of South Sudan, the question of Peter Ayuel, the question is digging of the artificial lakes possible instead of draining a river and the resumption of Jonglei Canal as the part of a solution to the frequent flooding in South Sudan? Where that will be one of your actually on table opinion you will give to the government of South Sudan. Do you think that, or what do you think in regard to
that? This was actually done and promoted by Deng Majok Shol. He's a young man. He's an Oxford graduate. And out of fairness and out of respect for him, I need to confirm that the first time I heard it from Deng. And that's the viable solution. There can be artificial lakes. However, they need studies, they need design, and it costs money because you are not talking about a hafir, you are not talking about 500,000 cubic meters. You are talking about millions, you are talking about billions of cubic meters of water. So where do we put them? If you go to Jonglei Plains, which are flat, I mean, Jonglei is flat. If you go there, and if you go beyond the top dark soil, there is sand underneath. If you store water in sand, the water is going to go through. It will go into the underground water. One of the solutions, engineering solutions, is to put what we call polyethylene sheets, to put a sheet of plastic sheet all under the lake. I mean, that's quite expensive if you are talking about large lakes. The limit to where Deng stopped, the idea is brilliant. From an engineering point of view, it is doable. However, it needs studies. It needs costing. It needs the where and the when and the how much. That has not been done. So yes, this is an option, but it will not be me who will propose it. Otherwise, it will be unfair on Deng. I understand that Deng is invited as well. If he's there, I am sure he's going to present it, and I will support him. If for any reason he's not there, I will present it on his behalf, and I will support his idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Gasim keep asking me repeating question. Are you able to take that question, Prof, or just we can go?
No, I can take the question.
Yeah, the question السؤال بعربي من قاسم. You keep posting the question. هو قاعد يقول السؤال للبروفيسور بخصوص تضمين الاستراتيجية الأمنية للحكومة المصرية تجاه دولة جنوب السودان واستكمال الدراسات الهيدرولوجية والطبوغرافية للمناطق المستنقعات داخل دولة جنوب السودان. هل تعني بين الدراسات تم دون علم الجهات المختصة؟ لذلك تم ترحيل الآلات الضخمة والظاهرة في وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي لتنفيذ المهام المنوط بها؟
طيب أنا داير أوجه السيد الفاضل اللي سأل السؤال للويب سايت بتاع الحكومة المصرية. الويب سايت بتاع الحكومة المصرية فيه 44 صفحة 44 pages. السؤال كان بالعربي ولا بالإنجليزي؟
بالعربي.
بالعربي. في 44 صفحة 44 صفحة في الويب سايت بتاع الحكومة المصرية عن الزيارات المتبادلة والشغل ما بين جنوب السودان ما بين مصر. ما في حاجة مسوسة بالتواريخ بأسماء الناس اللي انفولد، منو جاء ومشى وين. واحد فيهم عزموه عشان يحضر الافتتاح بتاع عز الزهور، يس، رحلات الإهرامات إلى آخره. ال 26.6 مليون دولار دي nobody knows، ما في دول شاف الاتفاقية ولا عارفين البنود بتاعتها شنو. ففي lack of transparency، في عدم وضوح في بالضبط الشيء الحاصل شنو. كون المصريين يكونوا شغالين او غيرهم، المصريين او غيرهم يكونوا شغالين بظهر الحكومه بتاع جنوب السودان ده وارد، لكن انا ما عندي برهان يعني عشان اقول yes this is what was happening. I need empirical evidence، ده الدليل. كونه العده دي زي ما قلنا قبل، العده دي ما ترسلت لحكومه جنوب السودان ولا اترسلت لوزارة الري، اترسلت لبعثة وزارة المياه والري المصرية في جنوب السودان. في الأول حقنا الرقم، فينا كم زول عارف على أنه في بعثة بالصورة دي، والبعثة بتعمل شنو؟ المانديت بتاع شنو؟ الكنترول بتاع حكومة جنوب السودان على شنو؟ بتاع الوزارة على شنو؟ دي كلها أسئلة ما عندها في الحقيقة إجابات. ففي هنا في بلاك هول اللي احنا عايزين لنا زول يكون زي الصندوق الاسود بتاع الطياره عشان يحلنا الحاجات دي كلها. اجابه على السؤال I really don't know، وما داير اعمل speculation، ما داير اعمل تخمين، وما داير اتهم زول. it will not be right. لكن انا بفتكر واجبنا، انا سالتها نفس السؤال ده بصوره مختلفه واوسع، سالته للجهه المسؤوله ومنتظر رد. ردوا علينا ولا نقول، يبقى لو عندنا راي بنديهم، ما ردوا علينا ما في حاجه ممكن نعملها. لكن انا داير كل سيتيزن يعرف على انه عنده سيتيزنز رايت. كونه في حكومه قاعده ما مع الحكومه ما بتعمل اي حاجه دايرها في البلد، البلد ما حقت الحكومه، البلد تحت الناس. فاي سيتيزن دياسبورا ولا ما دياسبورا عنده سؤال يوجهه، اكتب للسفاره، اكتب للرئيس، خش معانا في الحوارات دي. الاونربل جوشوا ده عنده شغل كويس جدا بيحاول يشتغل فيه. في جروب من الناس، نحن افتكر 18 19 20 نفر دلوقتي، كلهم ناس كويسين جدا. ممكن الناس تدخل عشان تشوف نحن بنتكلم على شنو. تعمل بوديز ثانيه، في مجموعه بتاعت نساء شغاله انا اتكلمت معاهم قبل كده، مستعد اتكلم معاهم اني تايم. الشغل اللي انت بتعمل فيه، ففي الحقيقه محتاجين لوات يسميه بيبلز بريشر. الحكومه لو حسينا بانه ما واضحه او ضلت الطريق، نقويها نتكلم معاه. في خطوره علينا يس، ولا نقول دارين يقبضونا يخطونا في السجن. واتس ذا بروبلم؟
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Prof Tag, actually, for being with us here 2 hours, actually answering the question. Let me give you the final remark to the viewers, and we would wish you a pleasant travel to South Sudan also, to keep enlightening our governments and the official also about what they need to be done and what is right actually they're supposed to do. So thank you so much for being with me here 2 hours. Let me give you the final remark to the viewers. Thank you, Prof.
Well, my final remark is never give up. And I always quote the example of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, while he was on the cross, he was preaching and he was giving people hope. And Jesus Christ sacrificed his blood for the sake of humanity. So, who are we compared to the glorious Jesus Christ? And I'm saying that, and I'm not a Christian, but I'm taking the good example. I'll give you another example. I'll give you the example of David and the Goliath. David was a small man when he met the Goliath, but he killed the Goliath because he had a cause, and the Goliath didn't have a cause. The Goliath was probably 5 times as big as David. Still, King David managed to kill the Goliath. So don't underestimate the power of one. Don't underestimate your voice. If you have a cause, especially if it is a cause for your people, for the wider humanity and the human beings in South Sudan, don't give up and do your part. If I do my part, Edward does his part, you do your part. At the end of the day, collectively, we can have an impact. And I wish you all a very pleasant Sunday, and let us pray for South Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof Tag. You have a pleasant evening. Thank you so much. God bless you. And God will bless you all the viewers. Thank you, Prof.
منبر صوت الشعب، الراي والراي الآخر شعب واحد ووطن واحد.
Mama,